And frankly, if you're going to make a career in the commercial real estate business, you better understand how to solve problems because they're just, I mean, I often say that it's you're always waiting for that second shoe to drop, right? In other words, if a deal's going smoothly, you're a little bit anxious because you know there's going to be a glitch. There's just always a glitch. So plan on it, expect it, and figure out a way to solve it. He used to have a saying, and the saying went, "Hey, you don't get paid until you solve all the deal problems." And truer words were never spoken. So I definitely learned in that regard how to solve problems. The thing I learned from his brother Paul, Paul was the best qualifier I've ever met. And he could walk into a room and he could ask the most uncomfortable questions of an occupant or an owner that I've ever heard. I mean, it would make you cringe. He was just so brutally frank with clients. And they were the questions all of us had in our mind. All of us wanted to ask, but none of us, frankly, had the guts to do so. Paul would do it. And Paul rarely worked with anyone that couldn't clearly articulate, here is what we need and here is why. And so those two skill sets, frankly, have enabled me to close very complicated real estate transactions, solve problems, work with control, not spin wheels on deals that aren't going to go anywhere.
Welcome to CREPN Radio for influential commercial real estate professionals who work with investors, buyers, and sellers of commercial real estate coast to coast. Whether you're an investor, broker, lender, property manager, attorney, or accountant, we're here to learn from the experts.
Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio. Thanks for joining us. My name is J. Darren Gross. This is the podcast focused on commercial real estate investment and risk management strategies. Weekly, we have conversations with commercial real estate investors and professionals who provide their experience and insight to help you grow your real estate portfolio. Today's interview is sponsored by Building Insurance and Risk. When you invest in real estate, it pays to work with a real estate investor protection specialist to protect yourself and your investment from catastrophic loss. The experts at Building Insurance and Risk focus on real estate investor protection. They provide you with multiple insurance coverage offers and a side-by-side coverage comparison. To learn more, go to buildinginsurancerisk.com. Today, my guest is Allen Buchanan. Allen Buchanan is an SIOR and is a nationally recognized commercial real estate broker, columnist, speaker, and creator of the Sequence Success Framework. He's also a principal at Lee & Associates in Orange County, California. And in just a minute, we're going to speak with Allen Buchanan about building a successful career in commercial real estate. But first, a quick reminder, if you like our show, CREPN Radio, there are a couple things you can do to help us out. You can like, share, and subscribe. And as always, we encourage you to leave a comment. We love to hear from our listeners. Also, if you want to see how handsome our guests are, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. You can find us on YouTube at Commercial Real Estate Pro Network. And while you're there, please subscribe. With that, I want to welcome my guest, Allen Buchanan. Welcome back to CREPN Radio.
Great being here. Thanks for having me again, Darren. It's great to see you, my friend.
Always good to see and hear you. But for those that may not know, before we get started, if you could take just a second and share a little bit about your background.
I would be happy to. So I just completed my 41st year in the commercial real estate business with the same company, Lee & Associates Commercial Real Estate Services. I'm with the Orange County, California office. We were the second in the chain. We now have approximately 80 worldwide. I started as a very young practitioner out of the consumer goods business. Spent some time with Procter & Gamble and a large major wine company, and discovered that I was on way too many airplanes, and with a young family that wasn't working. So I walked in one Saturday and resigned, and my manager said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "I don't know, but I'm not going to do this anymore." So he wished me the best of luck, and I ended up talking to a friend of my dad's who became a mentor, who pointed me in the direction of commercial real estate, found Lee & Associates, and the rest, so they say, is history. So That's where we are today, my man.
Awesome. Well, the commercial real estate, before we dive into more of our how to be successful in this, I'm kind of curious, how did you land on, uh, the asset class that you ended up focusing on?
By accident, candidly. I was fortunate to be hired as a runner with a couple of very seasoned professionals. One of my mentors, a gentleman by the name of John Earnhardt, God rest his soul, was an industrial specialist and had been for about 10 years. His younger brother, Paul, and Paul's still around, was was also an industrial specialist, and they had been with a company called Ashwell Burke in North Orange County, California, which is where I wanted to work. So frankly, I didn't know the difference between industrial, office, retail, et cetera. And I was fortunate to be pointed in the direction of industrial because that sort of really fits my eye. I had grown up in the consumer goods business, as I mentioned. I was extremely familiar with supermarkets. And I asked the question in one of the early interviews, hey, what about doing that sort of work? And I was discouraged from doing retail work, just because of the nature. They said, look, if you want to talk to family-owned, family-operated manufacturing, logistics companies, industrial is the way to do it. So that's I would love to tell you there was a deep strategy involved, but the reality was I happened in it quite by accident and quite fortuitously, I should say.
No, I love it. I always enjoy hearing how people got to, especially if there's a specific asset class that you focus on, the backstory there. So that's great. So let's rewind the clock here a little bit. You said, was it 41 years?
Yes, sir. 41 years as of
Four-
June. Yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations on a long career, a prosperous commercial real estate career. Not all can say that. Um, so in the beginning, you said you had some people that you were that kind of mentored you. I'm curious in the beginning with even with a mentor, was it always smooth sailing? Were you always knocking them dead?
Great question. I categorize my mentors in the book that I wrote, and I talk about six, and you talk about smooth sailing. One of my early mentors was a gentleman by the name of Dwayne Coburg. Dwayne was a district manager in the Seattle, Washington district, and I know it's up near where you are. Portland was actually a part of our territory. But my job was to communicate with the sales team. I was not responsible for people, but I was responsible for communicating the district manager's direction to the sales team. And there were three ways you did that. You did that either in person, you did it by phone, or you did it by correspondence, by writing memos, etc. And so my job for Dwayne was to write these sales programs, and they would come out monthly. We had food products for Procter and Gamble, Crisco shortening, Duncan Hines cake mix, Jif peanut butter. And so I was responsible for writing these communications. And I thought at the time, I thought I was a decent writer. Well, I'd write these things and I'd send them to Dwayne, and Dwayne would mark them up with red ink and send them back. And we'd end up going back and forth. I mean, I kid you not, Darren, sometimes these things went back and forth 7 or 8 times. And he was such a word purist and such a language aficionado. And it just used to drive me crazy because he had a very, very abrupt, very brusque way of saying, you need to rewrite this. But he wouldn't say, you need to rewrite it like this. He would just say, you need to rewrite this. And it's kind of like, hey, bring me a rock. Well, here's a rock. Well, yeah, that sure is a rock. Bring me another rock. And I always felt like I didn't quite know what he wanted. So I would rewrite them 6, 7, 8 times. Finally, we would get the finished product. And little did I know at the time that trained me to become a very good written communicator as well as a very good verbal communicator, because I got to the point where I could think about a message and then I could quickly translate that into the written word. And it was rough. because I never really felt like I was doing a good job. But interestingly, we were in the Pacific Northwest a couple of summers ago, and I reconnected with Dwayne. I called him, and he's still around. He's in his 80s. He's kicking around. He's doing great. But yeah, that was rough. And another just brief sort of rough patch. When I was first with Lee and Associates, I signed a one-page runnership agreement, which outlined here are your responsibilities. Here are the listings that we're going to ask you to work on our behalf. And so I set about doing that. Now, my tasks each day didn't necessarily follow along with your marketing XYZQ listing. They might be, hey, you're preparing a lease abstract, you're going on a tour, you're doing this, you're doing that. You're learning, but I guess in my mind, I thought, well, I must be involved in these deals. All of a sudden, one closes and there's a fee that's earned. And so now the commissions are cut up, and you can imagine I'd been in the business 60 days. I had no money. I had a little baby, a wife, mortgage, car payment. I was, trying to make every dime I could. And I was told in no uncertain terms, sorry, you're not involved in this deal. And if you have any questions as to what deals you are involved in, take a look at your agreement. And I had signed this agreement on faith, but I didn't really understand that, hey, I wasn't involved in everything I was working on day to day. So those were a couple of the two early rough patches that were challenging in my career.
But it sounds like it was a lively, I mean, live bullets kind of, environment where you were doing all of the work that would eventually lead to a career. I mean, from the standpoint of knowing what you're doing, would you categorize it? I mean, was it training? Did it root you well in, for your path as far as knowing the asset and all that, or did you feel like there needed to be some changes?
No, it absolutely did. And I also talk about this in the book. John Earnhardt was one of the best problem solvers I've ever met. He could see a problem for many, many, many different directions. He could come up with solutions that were embedded in the problem. He was a master of that, and he taught me how to problem solve. And frankly, if you're going to make a career in the commercial real estate business, you better understand how to solve problems, because they're just, I mean, I often say that you're always waiting for that second shoe to drop, right? In other words, if a deal's going smoothly, you're a little bit anxious because there's going to be a glitch. There's just always a glitch. So plan on it, expect it, and figure out a way to solve it. He used to have a saying, and the saying went, hey, you don't get paid until you solve all the deal problems. And truer words were never spoken. So I definitely learned in that regard how to solve problems. The thing I learned from his brother Paul, Paul was the best qualifier I've ever met. And he could walk into a room and he could ask the most uncomfortable questions of an occupant or an owner that I've ever heard. I mean, it would make you cringe. He was just so brutally frank with clients. And they were the questions all of us had in our mind, all of us wanted to ask, but none of us, frankly, had the guts to do so. Paul would do it. And Paul rarely worked with anyone that couldn't clearly articulate, here is what we need and here is why. And so those two skill sets, frankly, have enabled me to close very complicated real estate transactions, solve problems, work with control, not spin wheels on deals that aren't going to go anywhere. So definitely those two pointed me in the direction that created a 41-year career.
Well, it sounds like fundamentally the ability to communicate well, in some sort of frank manner, and be efficient, are perhaps cornerstones to, your career, or the ability to have a good career in commercial real estate, and perhaps sales as well. I mean, just like you sound like your first efforts were before the commercial real estate. But is that do you find that to be the case? Is that I mean, communication, is that kind of first and foremost?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I look, writing this book really enabled me to think deeply about decisions that I've made along my life that have enabled me to be a successful real estate broker. And it goes back as far as 1970 when I chose to be a faithful follower. It contrarian decisions like moving to Southern California, contrarian decisions like choosing to be a commercial real estate broker, to work at my company, Lee and Associates, to put a crimp on drinking alcohol. I was doing way too much of that in my early days. And all of those decisions have, as I look back on those, they were the cornerstones that helped me build a sort of foundation that's led to success. One of my early stories I share is my parents told us that they were getting a divorce when I was 12 years old. Now they ended up not divorcing until I was 14. But imagine, you're a 14-year-old young man, you're trying to figure out how the heck you fit into the world. You're sort of distracted with teenage frivolity, and all of a sudden you've got these serious life challenges right in front of you. And so I look back and what that taught me is it taught me to become a mediator, because I had, two very disparate parents who had different ideas on the world. I had two siblings that were younger, kind of looked to me for direction. And it placed in me an ability to sort of see both sides and to communicate with both sides very freely and very honestly and also very empathetically. And as you know, that's what negotiation is all about. It's trying to find a common ground when you might have two very differing opinions or two very differing directions. So yeah, as I think back, all of it has sort of fallen in place for a reason, and it's kind of cool to be able to be this age and be able to reflect on that.
Yeah. So let me ask you, one of the challenges I think in any kind of sales career, and probably even more so in large commission type transaction careers, is the consistency of keeping the pipe full and having that, or not having one deal. You just need this one deal to like keep everything going, but to have a pipe that's full and to be have lots of prospects and have a full pipe of prosperity or prospects that will continue to feed you. In your journey, have you had periods that were not that way? And if so, how did you course correct?
So I believe every salesperson ever has had that challenge. And if they suggest otherwise, I would be of the opinion that maybe they're not telling the whole truth. It's definitely a journey. It's definitely something that you have to learn. For me, I struggled with, you get something under contract, now you're depending upon it to close. And I used to struggle with, why on earth would I be prospecting for something new when the whole purpose of finding something new is to get something in the queue that you can close? So if you're not spending all of your efforts, this was me 25 years ago. If you're not spending your efforts trying to get that transaction closed, what's the purpose of finding something new? I always had that real struggle. And it finally dawned on me that, look, you need to have amazing support around you, and you need to train that support so that they're doing those sort of rudimentary things to get that deal closed. Now, is that support solving problems when a deal hits a speed bump? Probably not. But are there tasks involved in getting those deals closed that need attention, but maybe not your attention? And so that's where the addition of a transaction coordinator, the addition of an assistant, the addition of a junior producer, the addition of someone that does marketing research for us came into play. And then I could spend time more on building client relationships, building a strong foundation that created transactions. I'd say that's big. The other thing for me was in the vast majority of my practice, I focused on family-owned, family-operated manufacturing, distribution, logistics customers. These are people I can touch within an hour drive of my office. And I found that if I did a good job representing them, then I took them out of the market for, in some cases, maybe they're the entirety of their company because I sold them a building, they don't need another building, et cetera. Now, to the extent they can introduce me to some of their suppliers, customers, friends, et cetera, great. But to the extent that they don't know anyone or have anyone in that space, I've taken them out of the market. So relying upon strategic partners, cooperating brokers, folks like yourself that sell commercial insurance, CPAs, wealth advisors, folks that touch my ideal customer. If I spend time talking to them and nurturing relationship with them, what I've found is the pipeline tends to stay full through a referral network. So those would be my two bigs as far as how to keep your pipeline full.
Got it. When you speak of referrals and kind of a network, did you have any kind of a formal group that you were a member of, or was it more of just you on your own that you sought out people in those referral positions?
The answer is I did. I did in fact have a network. I write that commercial real estate brokers, for the most part, kind of suck at networking, and I believe that's largely true. I mean, I'm one. I can punch up. Here's what commercial real estate brokers tend to do. We tend to go to SIOR meetings or NAIP meetings or open houses or company golf tournaments, and we chat up among ourselves. And everyone in the room knows what each other does. Oh yeah, Buchanan's an industrial specialist. Darren's an office specialist, et cetera. Yeah, he did that deal. He did this deal. We don't really have a sense of each other's quote unquote ideal customer because we view each other as competitors. So it really came home to me in the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. I had sold a multi-tenant industrial project to a gentleman. He had managed to run off all of the tenants in early 2010 and needed me to help him fill them. Now, these are tiny deals. These are little 12, 13, 14, 1,500 square foot leases. If you ever did a term of more than 2 years, it was rare. And so I was earning 32 cents on these deals. I mean, it was barely worth the gas money to get in the car and drive up there. One day he says, "Hey, there's a business expo at California State University, Fullerton, not too far from where we live, not too far from the project." He says, "Why don't you show up, hand out a few flyers?" And I said, "Okay, great. I don't typically work on Saturdays, but this was 2010 when you worked on Saturdays." And I show up. The first gentleman I introduced myself to is a commercial printer, and he's in the city of Fullerton. And I said, "Hey, let me introduce you to this project. We're looking for tenants. Any chance you're looking for space?" The guy says, "Why would I need to lease space? I've already got a location." And I was sort of dumbfounded. And I asked him, "So if you're in my position, what would you do?" He says, "Well, if I were in your position, I'd come to my networking meeting on Tuesday morning at 7:30. It's a breakfast. Business owners, I'll introduce you around. It'll be great." And so I walk into this room and it's just buzzing with activity, but you got a nail salon, a prepaid legal help, you've got all these businesses. And I looked and I said, "Man, there's no one in here that would be an ideal client." But what I didn't understand was you're not there to sell to the room, you're there to sell through the room. It's all about introductions and it's all about strategic networking. So my first attempt at a commercial was just abysmal because once again, I never had to explain to anyone what I did for a living. Everyone already knew. But when you try to explain to a commercial insurance agent who doesn't know what we do, how do you make that simple so that they understand and so that they then introduce you to someone who could potentially do business with you? And so that was my networking journey. And very quickly, I realized that there were 6 professions that I needed to concentrate my efforts. And your industry, commercial insurance, was one of them.
Yeah, the networking, like you said, I like the way you say it. It's not sell to the room, but through the room. and finding those positions of influence that have the ability to recognize your prospects and then speak of you highly and refer you is I found that to be powerful in my career as well. I want to back up a little bit to the team aspect you spoke about when you know recognize the pieces that were missing, and you know because it sounded like before you were like a one man band trying to again close the deal, close the deal, close the deal. Can you speak a little bit to how you recognize, or I mean, because my sense is similar to where I work. There's a lot of freedom in making decisions on how you work. And there's not a lot of like structure on like, this is the way you do it. First you do this, then you do that, then you do this. Um, if I understood what you said, there was a recognition that you had about, you know, finding some people to help fulfill the roles that would then free you up to do more of the relationship management. Uh, but without somebody pointing you on what you needed to do next, how was it that you know came to these decisions on who you needed and what you needed? Were there specific tasks that you were performing that you recognized could be broken off and assigned to someone, or how'd that happen?
Yeah, trial by fire, frankly. I just ultimately figured it out as a little bit of a slow learner, I guess. Um, I tell the story about I was blessed to have two of my boys play baseball. My daughter played volleyball, but I was the coach of their little league baseball teams, and I showed up at I was honored to be the all-star coach for my oldest son's little league team. And I showed up to the first all-star practice and I looked around and we said, okay, everyone introduce yourself and what position you played for your previous team. And all 12 of them, I kid you not, all 12 of them said they played shortstop. And we had a team of 12 shortstops. And I thought, who's going to catch? Who's going to pitch? Who's going to play center field? We don't have anyone that's left-handed that can play first base. I mean, this is a disaster. And so that really taught me that a team is built of roles. It's not built of someone that's a synonym of you. And I would say the first 25 years of my career, my quote unquote team consisted of an ad hoc partner that I viewed as similar. Either I sourced a deal, brought them in, they sourced a deal, brought me in. But in terms of, hey, who's doing the pitching and the catching, we were both trying to play shortstop. So for me, it was a pretty steep learning curve. Very early in my career, there was a young lady in our office that just absolutely crushed it. She had 3 or 4 big corporate clients, and they would buy office buildings from her. Once she sold them, she would do the marketing. She was a 7-figure producer in the 1990s, which is unheard of. It'd be like an 8-figure producer today. She was phenomenal. Well, she had something that was amazing. She had an assistant. Now, this wasn't someone our company paid for. This is someone she paid for out of her own pocket. And she paid him well. And I used to ask her, I'd say, how on earth do you afford to do that? And she goes, ask me the question at the end of the year. Well, at the end of the year, she and I had made about the same amount of money. But she said, how much did you split? And I said, well, I split 60% of my income. I said, how much of yours did she split? She says, I split 0. She goes, I wrote my guy a check for X amount of dollars. You split your income 60%. What did that 60% cost you? In other words, if you'd done all that business yourself, because you had an assistant and a support staff versus an ad hoc partner that you were splitting a deal with 50-50, how would your revenue have looked? And that was a huge eye opener for me. Now, did I rush out and hire an assistant? I didn't, because once again, I'm a bit of a slow learner, and I had to finally reconcile the dollars that, you've got to commit to that. You've got to commit to that expenditure, which we're taught in our business as, you keep your overhead low. But once I finally took that leap, that's when things really started taking off in my career.
Yeah, the slow learner. My wife and I always kid that wore the slow skis. And there is some there's clearly some truth to that. I mean, but everything you're saying, I'm a little less, as far as time in my career than you, but my head nods, and I mean, I literally was having this conversation with a colleague of mine, just about recognizing our roles, uh, and a lot of the team, having team members that you trust and know will do a good job, and handing off the task to them that frees you up to maintain that relationship, is it's really what the job is. I mean, at least at this point it is. And I appreciate.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, pardon the interruption, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you have a client that has an insurance need, you have to then go to different providers with that requirement, correct? And once you go to a Liberty Mutual or a Chubb or you name it, you're sort of earmarked as you represent that client with that particular provider. Well, that's not necessarily work that Darren needs to be doing. It's important work. You got to do it. I mean, but once you've secured the assignment, why can't an associate, a junior, an assistant, why can't they do that work and approach those providers? And with us, it's similar, right? You get an assignment to help a company find a building. Well, there's a tremendous amount of legwork. You've got to do surveys, you've got to call brokers, you've got to identify, off-market alternatives. All that is very, very important work, but it's not necessarily important work for me to do. It's important work for a team member to do. And as you think about your practice, whether you sell triple net leased investments nationally, whether you work with family owned and operated companies, whether you have listings, there are just rote tasks that must be done. And once again, do they need to be done for someone that's should potentially be making $600-700 an hour, which would be in your case, or are they tasks that you can outsource to someone that makes $100 an hour? And my contention is you should be outsourcing those tasks.
Yeah, no, and I think the maturation, or I don't know. I feel like I probably held myself back more than I, propelled myself from the standpoint of trying to do more of the things myself, because I felt like, I don't know, I guess it was lack of trust, and not understanding the role that others could play and help, you know, make me grow or help me grow, kind of thing, and just lots and lots of stress that I brought on and kind of worked through. But it's a totally different place now, or I'm at a totally different place now, and just understanding having quality people to help back me up and support me, and allowing them to do their work as opposed to constantly jumping in the middle and making a mess of it. Definitely, it's been a big aha for me. And and again, as a slow ski, it took me a long time to get here, but I'm understanding the role and can concur with everything you're saying. And I'm happy to find out, or someone that didn't know it right off the bat, and like, of course, that's obvious. Why wouldn't you do it this way? Why wouldn't everybody do it this way?
The interesting thing is, I mentioned the two mentors that helped shape my early career. They actually had a third member of their team that, and these three gentlemen split every dollar of revenue 33, 33, 33, right down in thirds. And they realized, and so that was my revenue model. That's what I believed was the way you approach the business. Now, they all had separate roles. John's role was sort of as the strategist. Doug's role, who was the third member of the team, his role was to go out and beat the bushes and find the deals and walk in and have Paul qualify them and have John execute them. That was kind of their continuum, and it worked. But during my tenure there, they started to say, hey, is my role more important than your role? I mean, is the sourcing the most important? Is the execution the most important? I mean, at one point they thought, gee, I don't need to pay a third of my income to someone to execute a deal that I could be paying, a transaction coordinator a fraction of that cost. And so their team went through some changes. Um, so unfortunately, I see big teams of producers these days, and frankly, I wonder how they do it. I mean, no one's ever really sat me down and said, here's how we structure every dollar, because I suspect it's a bit fluid. But in my opinion, the very best teams are the ones that have support roles. Once again, not 12 shortstops, but people that can play different roles. It's okay to have utility players, right? It's okay to have, keep using baseball. It's okay to have someone that, yeah, if they're not pitching, they're playing first base, but have those distinct roles, in my opinion, is the way to go.
Got it. Let me ask you a question about mindset. Um, in your experience, where does mindset rank as far as its importance, and how do you maintain a positive mindset?
It may be one of the most important things in what we do, or what, frankly, any sales professional does. I mentioned earlier my faith, my faith guides my mindset a great deal. And I don't pray for outcomes necessarily. I pray for wisdom. I pray to be present. I pray to have people placed in my path that I can help glorify his name. Those sorts of things, that mindset. I had a mindset very early on, just probably because of my upbringing and some of the early drama that I experienced, that suggested I'm not a quitter. And I've always believed that if I hung in there long enough, I was going to overcome whatever obstacle I encountered. So that's very important in my mindset. I'm a bit of a loner. I love people, but I also find that I need to be alone quite a bit. And long walks through the dusty trails of East Orange help. Listening to long form podcasts help. Getting up very early in the morning, all that helps. So I find if I don't have that time to sort of reset and think, then my business suffers as a result, my relationships suffer as a result. So I dare, those are probably the three prongs of my mindset. I have a very, very structured way in which I spend my mornings. And frankly, if I don't get to spend my mornings that way, I feel a bit shortchanged. So it's critical. And if you don't have the proper mindset, frankly, in anything you're doing, it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah, no, I concur. Having some sort of a North Star, and staying, I think everybody faces the up and the down and the noise, and the pressures that life brings. But having some sort of a routine that's consistent. You mentioned your faith. You mentioned walk. Some sort of like head clearing and activity type stuff. Exercise. I find it all very important. Just a routine of it, because it's a centering thing for me. Just to start the day in a way that. I mean, I've got a good base. I'm not starting with drama or trauma, or it's clear and focused, and go forward. So Alan, your book Sequence. Um, who Tell me who you would recommend, or who was this written for, that you would think that would gain the most, and have the most to gain from it.
The first genre it would appeal to real estate brokers, either commercial or residential, because it's nuanced in that regard. It's a niche book in that regard, in that there are tactics in the book that talk about qualifying. They talk about the sequence, as we mentioned in our run up. The sequence is a double entendre. Every letter of sequence stands for a stage in a real estate transaction. As I think further, this could appeal to, frankly, anyone in the sales business, because anyone in the sales business, you first got to source, which is the S. You've got to evaluate, which is the E. You've got to qualify. You've got to get some semblance of control, so the U is under control. You've got to execute it. You've got to negotiate and close it. You got to get paid. And then the E, the final E, is what I call expand. And very few folks do a good job of expanding. And what expanding means is you've just closed a deal. You've just placed an insurance policy. How do I take my win and expand that, get that into the inboxes of those with whom it matters? And so, frankly, anyone that's in the sales profession goes through all 7 of those steps. And they go through them over and over and over again. You may not realize you're going through them, but you are. You're going, so that's your pre-shot routine. You're going through every single one of those steps. So the double entendre I mentioned is, so that's the first meaning, the sequence, the steps of a deal. The second meaning is your career, your life has a sequence. And if you stop and think about the decisions that you've made, how you've made your living, what you hope to leave behind, what you hope to give back, that's where the bigger meaning of sequence comes in. So I've had friends that have ordered the book, Darren, that have nothing to do with commercial real estate or sales, but they just want to read about, how to build a successful career. And I believe it speaks to those sorts of people as well. In other words, everyone has a career, whether you're a data processor, you sell commercial insurance, or you're a software engineer, everyone has a career. So how do you build that? In my opinion, it starts with some very basic decisions, the simple choices we make, where we live, how we worship, who we marry. All of those things absolutely matter.
Awesome. And where can people go to get a copy?
Well, you can go to Amazon, because that's the place we have it published presently. And if you go to The Sequence, and sequence all capitalized, my name, Allen C. Buchanan, ALLENC Buchanan. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm sure people are getting tired of me posting it on LinkedIn, but I've got a couple of links placed there. And yeah, that's Amazon's the best place. It looks like this. Kind of pleased with the way it turned out. So that is that's my first in a series of a sequence of books. How's that?
There you go. Hey, Alan, if we could, I'd like to shift gears here real quick. By day, I'm an insurance broker, and as such, I work with my clients to assess risk and determine what to do with the risk. And there's 3 strategies we typically consider. We first look to see if there's a way we can avoid the risk. If that's not an option, we look to see if there's a way we can minimize the risk. And if we're not able to avoid nor minimize, we look to see if there's a way we can transfer the risk. And that's what an insurance policy is. It's a risk transfer vehicle. And as such, I like to ask my guest if they can look at their own situation. It could be your clients, investors, interest rates, local jurisdiction rules, whatever it is that you identify and consider to be the biggest risk. And again, for clarification, while I'm an insurance broker, I'm not necessarily looking for an insurance-related answer. And so if you're willing, I'd like to ask you, Allen Buchanan, what is the biggest risk?
Darren, for me, the biggest risk is relevance. And I use this in a micro sense and a macro sense. The micro sense is I'm 68 years old. And so I realize that I'm on the back 9, maybe the last 3 holes of my career. And so maintaining relevance with those with whom I deal, first and foremost, family members, clients, friends, etc. There's then a relevance in terms of the commercial real estate profession. I know you've had guests on your podcast that specialize in artificial intelligence. And if you look at the ways in which artificial intelligence is chipping away at what all of us in the sales profession do, you'd have to realize that there's a greater risk that at some day commercial real estate brokers become, irrelevant. So to me, that's the biggest risk that we face, both on a micro and a macro level going forward.
Yeah, no, the AI is definitely going to reshape the world here. That's for sure. Alan, where can the listeners go if they'd like to learn more or connect with you?
So I'm active on LinkedIn, Allen C. Buchanan. I am active on Facebook, Allen Colin Buchanan. My website, allencbuchanan.com. I'm a practicing real estate broker with Lee and Associates. I am in the Orange County, the Orange, California office. Orange County has 3 offices. Mine is the Orange office. And you're certainly welcome to call me if you want. I have my cell number there broadcast on the podcast, so I don't keep that a secret. So that's probably the best way to get me.
Awesome. Well, Allen Buchanan, I cannot say thanks enough for taking the time to talk. I've enjoyed it as always, learned a lot, and look forward to our next conversation.
I do as well. Thank you, Hap, for having me, and thank you for promoting the sequence. It means a tremendous amount. And thanks for what you do, by the way. It's not easy to do what you do every week.
Well, I appreciate that. All right. For our listeners, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all I've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.
You're listening to CREPN Radio for influential commercial real estate professionals. For more information on this or any of our guests, like us on Facebook, CREPN Radio.